The year is sometime in the late 2000s. Two businessmen have just exited a conference room. One of them works for Sega, and the other works for Gearbox. And they just shook hands on a multi-million-dollar deal for Gearbox to develop a new video game with the Aliens IP. And this game would become to be known as Aliens Colonial Marines. Except that's not the game that's going to result from this agreement. Instead, Gearbox is going to immediately breach contract and use the funding to develop a completely different game unrelated to aliens without Sega knowing until it was too late. And somehow, this game would change the world. So, what game did Gearbox make? Borderlands is a game made by Gearbox Studios released in 2009, and to say it was a success would probably be selling it a bit short. For a game with a last-minute total art redesign made falsely off contractual obligation, attempting to invent a brand new video game genre, and while being spearheaded by Randy Pitchford of all people, it should have failed and become nothing more than Concord of 2009. And yet it sold over 4 million copies, the fourth entry comes out next month, and some people believe it's one of the most important games ever made. And today I'd like to talk about what a beautiful mess this first game is. But you're gonna have to give me a second, I gotta...
Oh, come on, sit down.
God, thank you. Okay, now I just have to... Come on! Finally! Jeez! Whether you want to admit it or not, Borderlands 1 is a cyberpunk dystopia. What it lacks in the hyper-fluorescent visuals, sprawling crime-ridden cities, and thinly disguised attempts at the same class-based discrimination that we see in the modern day, it makes up for in the incredibly anti-capitalist themes rooted in the lore and the presentation, all while having enough of a futuristic feel to it to make it right at home alongside modern entries in the aesthetic. There are no wacky characters, there's very little comic relief, there's no constant attempts at humor in your face that's difficult to ignore. Hell, for most of the game, you may not even believe there's a central antagonist. This game has something you wouldn't believe would come from anything in a game in the Borderlands franchise. Subtlety. And I believe much of this is by design. After all, just because the universe has machines that can resurrect you infinitely, and death means very little for those that can afford it, that doesn't mean one of the manufacturers that rule the galaxy won't try to profit off of it. Borderlands 1, at its core, is about a world abandoned and then oppressed by capitalist greed. The gun manufacturers fought wars over literally nothing with each other until the entire planet was destroyed, most of the workers were abandoned and went insane, and they all just realized that if they sit back and profit off the chaos, it's way, way easier to stay profitable. After all, why innovate and try to make something new and participate in competition when you could just doom a planet into eternal strife and then profit off of selling ammunition and weapons to both sides of the conflict that you inadvertently created yet take no responsibility for? The scientists turned soldiers turned psychos that fought for these companies are the only real residents of this planet anymore, straight for lots of unnatural wildlife and a few surviving establishments of sanity, with 2 to 3 layers of air quotes. Everyone is mad here, nothing is truly fair, and all that people have hoped for anymore is silly little folktales. Folktales like the one about the vault. A mysterious vault that opens once every 200 years containing... something! Surely! Weapons, money, power... There is no definite answer. Everybody has their own idea of what's inside, but few people are actually stupid enough to go and see for themselves. That is, until the Vault Hunters roll into town, representing the playable characters in the game across 4 classes. And while these Vault Hunters are, on the surface, meant to be stand-ins for the player, it only strengthens the narrative even more. After all, this isn't a typical RPG. You are not treated like some badass hero that deserves respect and admiration for simply surviving. Fuck, sorry, caught something in my throat. Sorry about that, I'm not sure what came over me. You are treated like an outsider. Every bit of world building that you come across is secondhand. People are rude, or straight up misleading to you, and you have to fight for any shred of truth. After all, you're not a hero, you're a Vault Hunter. You're a fool chasing a myth that probably doesn't even exist. Of course people are gonna treat you like a lunatic. That's the world that this game takes place in, and I adore it. The way to find out about this world's finer details is in the flavor text. Every quest in every game in the series has it, it's just that 90% of people don't read it. Myself included. What this leads to is that many people I've talked to about their experiences with this game end up being radically different, and that mostly boils down to how many side quests you're willing to do, and if you're willing to fully read into and play along with this game's quest and world. After all, this is an RPG from 2009. The need to immerse yourself in the world as a character was still very much the norm with RPGs, but here, it's taken to a much further extent. If you want to know everything there is to know about this game, you gotta do all of them. From hunting down Tannis' Echo Diary entries to killing a false god, all of these quests give you some sort of insight into the world of Pandora, even if indirectly. And for many people, they never really realize it unless it's told through voice dialogue that's already on the path of the main questline. I took the time to read the flavor text for every single quest in the game, and I'd like to go over some of the more interesting findings in my journey. Starting out, did you know that Scooter has full access over DRM of all the catch ride stations and can remotely lock you out of using cars? For 2009, they got the experience of using a Tesla surprisingly accurate. The bandits and psychos of this game are incredibly hive-minded compared to most games pre-Borderlands 3. While you go around killing bosses, the psychos of each boss you kill just find a new boss. Sledge gets name-dropped 10 entire story quests before you actually kill him, before even Helena Pierce even gets mentioned, who's supposed to be a much more vital character in the plot. As I alluded to before, Atlas has a total monopoly over the entire planet's internet connection. Iridium, at least spelled mostly correctly in name, is alluded to way before the events of Borderlands 2. Lastly, there's a quest very early on in the game where you kill a bunch of bandits that work for Nine Toes that are scouting out Firestone, and later on, there's a side quest that reveals the echo logs referring to those bandits' recruitment process into the clan by Nine Toes' boss Sledge, which I love. It's such a really nice world-building touch. I could go on, but these are some of the more noteworthy things that I found in my search. From the themes to the writing, the subtlety and the seriousness, Borderlands is a game that does things so radically different from any other game in the series, and it's such a massive draw to me. Much of what I've said in the past section are things that just don't happen in future entries. Vault Hunters having to fight for the truth and their reputation, starting from 2, you're now a badass and everyone knows your name 15 minutes before you step into the room. Anti-capitalist themes, barely prevalent in future entries. Planets abandoned by corporations, Borderlands 3 called, actually, it's only Pandora that's been abandoned. Every other planet is totally fine. They're all directly funded by corporations. Stop reading into it. Starting with Borderlands 2, the series' identity started to be less about these more, dare I say, hopeless and realistic themes, and more so about a wacky wasteland with silly guns named after innuendo. I mean, fuck, dude. Pandora is a place where at any moment, a corporation can snap their fingers and literally turn off all the internet and nobody can stop them. We went from this to the big suck. And while I've done my best to highlight the aspects of this title that I feel are overlooked, I'd be lying if I said that was the entire story. Because while the side quests are where the world building and the lore shines, it's the main quest line where we start to get to, let's just say, the more questionable decisions that went into this game. While I've demonstrated what this game can do with its writing, it's important to show the not-so-great sides too. There's easy targets to justify this, like the dated humor at points, but I believe the best example of this is in the game's 5 main boss fights. The first main boss in the game, Sledge, is an excellent example of this game doing its writing so right. You hear his name way before you actually fight him. You know he's a menace that's done a lot of horrible things to the people that disobey him. NPCs talk about him, and by the time you start the fight, you have a good reason to actually take him down. Hi, editor's note here. I put it together mentally that a major reason Sledge needs to be built up as much as he was is because Angel hasn't really told the player about the vault key fragments. So the build up to fighting Sledge is the prime motivation for the plot to progress and the player to keep playing. I still think the game overall leans too hard on this crutch to avoid making any build up to any other boss fight though, but I figured that this little detail was worth noting. Back to me. All of the other 4 main bosses don't do this. Crom, Rackhive, Baron Flint, and most infamously of all, the Destroyer, have absolutely zero build-up. In fact, for Rackhive and the Destroyer, You don't even know what you're fighting until the fight starts. I'll talk more about the Destroyer and the ending later on, and I do think there's some justification behind this, but it helps to make my point that the game tends to drop the ball for more of its boss introductions than it doesn't. And speaking of potentially dropping the ball...
Listen to this, mud dwellers. Skipping all the details that would confuse the lot of you, I have concluded that the vault is more than likely genuine. In addition to that fact, which has probably burned a hole in your brain, the vault can only be opened once every 2 centuries, and that time is about to arrive.
If you don't do any side quests involving Echo Diary entries, this is the first line of dialogue in the entire franchise from Dr. Patricia Tannis. I believe that Tannis is the defining character to surmise this game's quirks. This is a character that, on the surface, is rude, constantly insulting of others' intelligence, egotistical, lies to you for almost the entire time knowing you, and fucking sells you out by the game's ending for a really stupid reason. Playing through the game myself for the first time, even though I played 2 first and already knew she was a pretty vital character to the plot line of the series, I came out with the experience of, God, how on earth would anyone like this character? However, once you do decide to actually do the side quests, it reveals quite a lot of depth and relevance to her story and her link to the rest of the game. This is not just someone whose only link to her past life as a mentally stable scientist is in her research, but someone that was essentially forced to go insane by a corporation that wanted to profit off of proving myths and fairy tales. Even though she's incredibly knowledgeable about the vault, and the vault ended up being real after all, this is still someone destroyed by corporate greed, no different than just about any person alive on Pandora. And yet, if you never play along, if you don't indulge the game somewhat, play along with its set pieces, if you will, you may never learn about all these details and get an overwhelmingly worse view of the character. Or you'll just get told all this to you by some transfemme autistic loser you saw on YouTube. Either way, I think that while she's very, very far from a well-written character, Tannis is the culmination of all the good and bad this game can do with its writing. So, with all this talk about the writing, how does the game stick the landing? We've talked about the world building, the characters, the quest writing, and bits of the plot. So, how does the game tie it all together? Poorly. So, you get to the vault, and Commandant Steele is there. You know Commandant Steele from the game? I think she talks to you like 3 times. This is the primary antagonist, please believe us. She reveals she's a siren, opens the vault with the key Tannis gave her, and then dies. Final boss time. This abrupt transition, alongside just terrible final boss fight, is what makes the Destroyer so infamous. And one thing that I love is that it's all done intentionally. And the best way to prove this is to just turn closed captions on. In the closed captions, they took the time to write extra dialogue that Steele is supposed to say before she got impaled. Getting back to the Destroyer, many people hate this boss for many reasons, and the abrupt intentional train wreck of the story is partly to blame, for very understandable reasons. Hell, if you're playing the original, you don't even get chests, or even a real reward for killing the final boss, other than the knowledge you beat the game. This is really how the game ends. You don't even get to farm the final boss for a secret drop. It's a one-time kill with no drop table besides some money and maybe a green or 2. Was this foreshadowing for the game design of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands? We may never know. This is, obviously, very unsatisfying and a terrible ending that answers very few questions. But I'd like to offer a new view on it. Atlas is very much considered to be the antagonist of basically the entirety of Borderlands 1. And as a character, this is portrayed through Commandant Steele. Think Hyperion and Handsome Jack in Borderlands 2, except Commandant Steele isn't any amount of charismatic, present in the plot, or anything noteworthy in the slightest. The only interesting thing about her is that she comes back as an actual boss fight in the 4th DLC, that she's a siren, and this is all revealed less than 60 seconds before she gets impaled by the hentai monster from the vault and then promptly dies. And I think that's on purpose. I think this ending is meant to be purposefully unsatisfying, and not just as sequel bait. I think this ending is meant to make the player, and basically everyone involved in the plot, realize they are just pawns to a corporation. Mostly for Atlas, but for Hyperion too, you know, with Angel leading the Vault Hunters and being the living, breathing exposition machine that sets up for Handsome Jack's takeover in Borderlands 2. All of the game's events from the Vault Hunters arriving at Pandora to defeating the Vault, has been a ploy to continue the cycle that allows all the gun manufacturers to profit off both sides of the conflict they started. For Atlas, the focus is on the short term, which will bite them in the ass and cause them to go defunct after the events of DLC 3. Meanwhile, for Hyperion... Hyperion? Am I okay? Meanwhile, for Hyperion, it's the long term, with its effects leading to the events of Borderlands 2. The Vault Hunters are nothing more than a pawn to upload the capitalist status quo, no different than any soldier or psycho killed in their quest to try and fulfill their ultimately unfulfilling purpose. Boom! Told you I was cooking. I don't think that Borderlands 1, with the way that it's made, could be made today and still be successful, especially seeing that Gearbox is now no longer independent. Even for 2009, the whole concept of this game was an incredibly risky venture, and not just because it was, literally made off of stolen money, but Randy Pitchford really wanted to make Halo mixed with Diablo despite everybody telling him it was a bad idea, and now here we are. While I believe that Borderlands 1 is far from overall a good game, I think it's a fascinating game to dissect. It's done a lot of things that no other game in the franchise would even try to do, and I have a major soft spot for it and everything that it stands for, even if the rest of the series chose not to. If you're a fan of this franchise and you haven't gotten around to playing it yet, I would suggest getting it just to do one playthrough, even if just to see where the series even began. It may not be the best game in the series, but I think it's a really important one that every fan of the series should play at least once. From the lore to the themes, to the world building and the subtlety, to the well writing in some places and its very questionable moments in others, Borderlands 1 is an incredibly weird game that somehow changed the world. And I'm glad that it did. Now, just one problem. So, I was supposed to say that last line, and then a portal was supposed to, spawn behind me, but the Destroyer bugged out on this save file and didn't spawn. And I was dashboard farming earlier, so I haven't saved the game. So I'm gonna have to restart the game and lose all my progress. I probably should have, thought that through before, going into the fucking vault. But, yeah, here we are. So, you got any good guns? I got this, I have this Bulldog TK's Wave hybrid. I'll trade you for it. It's a hybrid. It's really rare. Okay, I'm just gonna restart.